guys, Matt, IronTrap Garage, and today is finally the day. We're gonna fix the freaking firewall. Yes. So if you guys may remember, if you've been watching these videos from the very beginning, this car started with a Y block that we think was done in the mid to late 50s and was an old, obviously forgotten hot rod. Well, what they did back in the day, which is just how a lot of these cars were done in backyard builds, the firewall was just kind of like torched or chiseled out to make room to fit the engine in, and they just left a big gaping hole into the cabin of the car. Obviously not good. You guys have been screaming at me to fix it. What's going on? What's going on? I'm finally getting to it. As I mentioned before, we're working through some other stuff that was more pressing. Now we can get to fixing the firewall. My idea for fixing the firewall is I want to make a removable panel for the backside of the engine so that we can fit it in a little easier. So I'm going to work on making a panel. We're going to start with a flat piece of metal, flange some edges, get everything to fit, and hopefully by the end of this we'll have a panel that we can bolt in place and cover that big, giant, ugly hole in the firewall. So let's get started. Alright, so I got my rough paper here set in place, rough cut it rather, and what I'm going to do is I'm trying to, or a little below there. Oh, first we're going to move our paper back up. But what we're going to try and do is just get the rough shape of this opening. So you guys saw in the last couple shots, I just kind of cut the mess out of here. I'm trying to not be as too invasive with this. I don't want to have to reinvent the firewall. I'm just trying to make a cover or patch for the mess that is already here. I've thought about this for a while, and well, I could go overboard and make a whole new firewall section. I don't think this car particularly warrants it, to be honest. We just need something that's going to separate the inside of the car, the cabin, from the firewall, and that should be good enough for me. So the main part is right here where the distributor is. That's probably the biggest problem, is the plug wires. And I thought about making an actual, like, weld a piece in and weld it all in and everything, but I realized quickly that it'd be very difficult to get to the distributor and get this distributor out, or possibly like change the cap or change the wires. So I think I want to make this removable, so we can use some of those riv nuts with the riv nut tool from Eastwood to make this a piece that bolts in, and that way we could take it out if I ever need to service anything. So I'm kind of going to make a cover that follows the original cut by using my dirty fingers here, hands. We're just going to follow this opening, and then I could start with cutting a piece out of this paper that will give us the rough size of what we need. It's not a normal shape here, so I can't just easily... Oh. Probably could use one more magnet. There. I've had some people ask in the videos what the magnets I use for this is. This is just the Eastwood stitch weld magnets. They're really good for holding metal in place if you're welding something or setting a panel up, but I also use them quite often for this, where you want to put a piece of paper and I want to put a piece of paper and hold it in place to make a pattern. They work really awesome for that. So, shout out for the stitch weld magnets. And we'll put a link for those in the video description, as we always do. For anybody that doesn't look at the description, we put a link to anything we use that's kind of important in the video or helpful. We put it in the description area. So, fun fact. I think what we're going to do is actually go to the toe board area. Right here is where like the toe board went to from the factory. So I think we're going to do the same thing on this side and end this piece basically like right where the toe board would sit. And then we have this crappy original tunnel in just to give me an idea for space. But we'll kind of end it in there as well. So I can actually find a rough idea. So I'm going to cut this centerpiece out, and that will be basically what we need to make. If I can find my marker. So we're probably going to roughly somewhere in here. Marker's dying. Roughly somewhere in there, drop the piece off, because we're then going to have a toe board that's going to come up to there, so we don't need to bring it all the way down. It goes in like that. Just like that. So there we go. That's roughly our piece right there that we want to use. So I'm going to get this cut out, transfer it to a piece of cardboard next, just to see what it's going to look like, and then we can kind of start mocking everything up from there. Alright, so we got our panel all laid out, and everything's looking about how I want. But what we need to do is we're going to actually, there's two steps here. So we want to step the panel so that it actually pushes out and gives us a little bit of space. And then also we want to flange the back side so that we have an edge that we can actually bolt this to the firewall and make it removable. So we're going to start with the first edge that we're going to fold back to give us the step out. And what reason we're doing that is so that we can adjust the panel before we flange that last end, and then we can kind of adjust things at the end, but it'll move a little less with the smaller flange, but you will see it's going to move quite a bit. So we're going to be flanging back, so we're going to start on my lines on the back side. And I'm using a sharp upper tipping die. This is actually out of the Eastwood hem die set. This is one of the steps, and I've been using this die, playing with it a little bit to get that. Using it for a step die, or I'm sorry, a tipping die, as well as so.
Just trying to get a line track made in the panel first, and then we'll start trying to flange next. Alright, on the home stretch here. Okay, so we got one line made in the panel there. So you can probably see what's happening when you're tipping an edge like this. I'm getting a curve to the panel, which is what we do not want. So by rolling or tipping an edge around this outside corner, what it's doing is giving the panel a bow, because we need to actually stretch around the corner to we need to shrink around the corner to actually let it pull back into itself. So we need to take this over the shrinker and adjust, especially right here in where it has where the radius is, get it back to basically flat, and then we'll continue to tip the edge. Alright, back to close to flat there. We can continue our tip down now. Alright, now we got the panel, got the edge tipped pretty good here around the whole front. Now what we need to do is bend our flange the other way. So what I did is I used again this sharp upper die from one of the hem die steps on these Eastwood hem die step hem kit. This is like step number 2, I believe. And then what I have is a soft lower die that I made out of an old skateboard wheel. I turned down the inside just a little bit so I can fit it in. And what I can actually do is basically dig into the skateboard wheel with this stand, with the upper die, like this, just so it digs in a little bit. And then when we run it through, I can keep the face of the panel against the outside edge of this skateboard wheel here, that we modified skateboard wheel, and we could start the process of tipping this edge up. Now we're going to have the same problem, but the opposite now that we're flipping up. we're going to need to stretch around the corners of this panel, because right in here where there's a lot of change in radius, we're going to have to actually do some stretching, so we're going to have to go the other way. So I didn't go too crazy with the shrinking, knowing that we're going to have on the edges, because I knew we were going to have to stretch. So we're going to, actually I think I'm going to get rid of this Sharpie line. I'm trying to get as much of a flange as possible. So by having the wheel, it basically digging into the wheel, it's going to naturally push that edge up. You'll probably see that the edge is going to start to curl up there on the outside, which is what we want. So I'm just trying to keep the face of the panel tight against it. Hear the panel popping. As we go around those corners, it's going to do some wacky stuff. Go. So you can see we started our edge. I know it's probably hard to see. I'll turn it like that. So it started tipping that edge up that way. So I'm gonna probably go through one more time, and then I'll start stretching these corners here so it'll allow it to tip a little easier. And we'll keep going until we have a flange tipped all the way around 90 degrees. I could start pulling up here soon, or I could switch the dies around and pull down, but yeah, so you can really start to see the flange is tipping. Now again, in the corners I can't pull up as hard because we know we need to like stretch or move things. I have the flange real short at the top here where there's almost no flange, because up there it actually runs into the bottom of the firewall. So we're not going to be able to bolt anything there, but I still want a flange, a little bit of a flange, but down on the sides here where we actually want to have bolts in there, so the flange is a little wider on those parts. Mainly focusing on these sharp corners here. I think that's the spot where I could feel, you can actually feel when you're tipping the edge. If you're in tune with the panel, you can kind of feel where it's starting to fight you to tip that edge up. So that's telling me that the panel's really tight there and it needs a little bit of stretch. So you can do this with a stretcher, you can do it with a hammer and dolly, and just hammer on dolly pretty hard, and that'll stretch the panel out as well. Either way, it doesn't matter. Depends on your end goal. But since this is a part that's hidden under the car, I don't really care if this flange has a little bit of serration marks on it from the stretcher. But that's all we're doing, just stretching those edges so I can go back through. Alright, so we'll do another roll here and see if we can get a little more 90 out of this. It's going to be a point where I have to do a little bit of work handheld with the hammer dolly, but should be able to get pretty close to 90 here without distorting the panel too much. That's the goal, at least. Boom. All right. Getting our 90. It's looking pretty good. Just this top flange here, I got to hammer over because I have the flange short. So because of the flange being short there, I had to be careful. If I pulled too hard, it would actually slip up off the panel. So I actually just kind of was a little less aggressive there with my flange, but we can just take a hammer and dolly and correct that. But overall, now we got this panel that's like incredibly strong. All right, so now we're going to tip this bottom edge. I want to tip it basically like a 45 for now, just to gain clearance around the tunnel. Same thing, dig in just a little bit. Just let it tip the edge up. Okay, that gave us our start of our tip there. So we don't have to really do much stretching or shrinking here because we're just rolling a straight line. We're not really going around the corner. So I can try to get my 45 now. Keep about the same pressure as you go. There you go. Basically our 45, we can do a little tapping around with the hammer and dolly. But that should work alright. Alright, now that I got this thing clecoed in place, I used like 4 clecos to just kind of get it to hold it to see exactly what we're working with here. What I think I'm going to do is I made it a little long here, so it actually sits down below where the floor pan, where the toe board will sit. My idea, I think, for this is that the toe board, we're going to change the way it was done originally a little bit, but the toe board is going to sit here, and it's going to go up and actually probably touch right here, and I'm going to flange the toe board piece that we make, because it was, I believe, wood originally, and we'll flange it so that it actually bolts into our little tunnel there, instead of going under the tunnel, because I'm afraid I'm going to have to cut the tunnel, or not tunnel, but you know what I mean, a little bump out for a Y block or a repair. I'm gonna put the little toe board to sit over top of it for this, because I don't want to cut it back too far, and then here where it sits on the little tunnel section, it's going to be a problem. So I'll trim it probably a little bit, but I'm not going to go too crazy because I don't want to have a big gap then at the center area. Another thing is, I kind of just left this line go all the way down for the shape of the patch. And it's obviously a little long right here. So what I'm going to do is try and get over here, right here where the firewall starts to kick back in. I'm going to actually probably cut it off there. We'll round it around right there and try and just blend it in the best we can. And I'll give it a little tweak so that it kind of rolls in. Everything will flow. But overall, I mean, compared to what we had before, it doesn't look too bad. I'm just making the best of what we have. I'm sure there's 1,000 other ways to do this that people will comment and say how I should have done it, but again, this car, I'm not trying to go too nuts cutting the firewall out. I'm just trying to work with what I've got and make it a little bit better and a little less crude than it was from from when it was hot rodded. So yeah, that's where we're at. I'm going to trim that little corner over here, get that fitting a little bit better, and then we'll see where we're at.
Alright, so I got the that piece made for the firewall and everything is fitting pretty good. I got the clecos in so that it holds its own, the whole panel is held in place now. And I'm pretty happy with it overall. Again, it's not too intricate of a panel, it's just something that I think covers the hole. We could put a little bit of a like foam seal around the outside flange, so when we tighten everything down it will grab together, seal up around that edge, and we'll have something that is a lot more airtight than a giant hole in the firewall that you can see the backside of the engine. The other thing that I mentioned earlier in the video, reason I did it this way is I want to have access to the distributor in the back of the engine. It's really tight in there. It's really hard to get to it, so this will be a much easier, quicker way that you can get to tighten down the distributor if we need to make some adjustments. If you want to pop off some of those wires on the cap in the back, it may be a little easier to just get under there, take that access panel off, and now you have an easier way to get to it. So that's why I did it that way. There are 1,000 different ways that you could have done this, stuff that definitely would be much nicer and more finished, but again, for what the car is, I'm really happy with it, and it was a fairly quick project. So now that I have that in there, what we can work on is I can get Andrew to do some of the drilling to the holes around the outside edge, put the threaded inserts in, get it tightened down so that everything fits, looks good, is something we can easily take on and off. And then when we get to making the toe boards for the inside of the floor here, we can work on getting the toe boards to fit that panel, finish everything out real nice, and then we'll have all these pieces that work together and look sort of factory, if you will. So next thing I'm probably going to tackle before we get into the toe boards is the battery box area. You guys probably saw that and were cringing like I was. It's a little crude. They just cut out the firewall, bent it down, put a little 90-degree bracket, and left a big giant hole where the battery is. So I want to make a piece that basically we can fill in around there and cover up that hole and get another giant gaping hole filled up in the firewall. So that's probably what we'll work on next time, and then after that we could probably work on tying together all the toe board stuff, and we are getting close to buttoning up all the metal work on the inside of the car, and we can start moving on some stuff that's maybe a little bit more fun, like wiring the car, working on some interior, glass. The list is never ending, but there is a small little tiny light at the end of the tunnel, which is really exciting for this car. That's all I have for this one. Appreciate you guys following along. Catch you later.